It's now been 1 year since anyone's seen Anna Knezevich, the American woman who went missing overseas last February. Her estranged husband is charged in her death, and now her brother-in-law is accused of tampering with evidence in the case. If all of that wasn't enough, federal investigators revealed a disturbing writing recovered from her husband's home, highlighting a Joseph Stalin quote about murder. They say it shows his murder mindset. All that's written in some newly released court documents, and there's a lot more updates too. But let's start from the top. This is Anna Knezevich. She's originally from Colombia, but later became an American citizen. The first part is important. It'll come back later. In the US, Anna lived in Fort Lauderdale with her husband, David Knezevich. Together, they owned an IT company and managed several vacation rental properties there too. Now, according to the feds, their bank account was certainly in the millions, but in late 2023 and early 2024, the relationship grew tumultuous. She described all of this in a WhatsApp voice note to one of her friends on January 24th of last year. Anna said, quote, "I was looking for a therapist, couples therapy, doing all this while he was playing behind my back. He behaved very bad with me. Even in sex, he acted extremely aggressive. I mean, bad. He treated me like the worst way possible. He told me that he called me all types of names that you can imagine. He mopped the floor with me, and that he no longer wanted to be with me." At the time of her disappearance, Anna and David were estranged, and they were even in talks of divorce. She left Fort Lauderdale around this time and rented an apartment in Madrid, Spain. The last time anyone for sure saw Anna was February 2nd of last year. At 1:42 p.m., she was seen entering her apartment in Madrid. Hours later, at 9:27 p.m., a man wearing a helmet and a mouth covering was seen entering the building. He spray painted the lens of the security camera in an effort to cover it up, but we still gotta look at him. Investigators believe this person is actually David Knezevich. Court documents even note this man's physical characteristics resemble those of David. Based on security footage, Spanish law enforcement was able to identify the brand of spray paint used to disable the security camera. Law enforcement then determined that a realtor in Madrid had a recorded sale of that particular brand of spray paint on February 2nd, 2024, the last day Anna was ever seen. Surveillance footage from the retailer depicted an individual who appeared to be David purchasing the spray paint along with 2 rolls of duct tape on February 2nd, 2024 around noon. Even though he spray painted the security camera lens, this man can still be seen with something that the feds believe was a rolling suitcase. There's video of him going into the apartment and leaving the apartment with this suitcase, and investigators now believe Anna may have been in that suitcase. Moving forward in the timeline to the following day, though, February 3rd, 2024. That's when Anna's best friend, Sana Ramo, received a strange message from Anna's WhatsApp account.
I spoke to her that Friday, and then the next day, on the 3rd, in the afternoon, I received those very strange messages that she had met a man on the street and she was going to go to his summer house, and none of it made sense.
Sana shared this text with us. Here's what it said. "I met someone wonderful. He has a summer house about 2 hours from Madrid. We are going there now, and I will spend a few days there. Signal is spotty. I'll call you when I get back." That same day on February 3rd, David sent some strange messages too. He had met a Colombian woman on Tinder in October of 2023, so he reached out to her for translation help. Court docs reveal part of their conversation. David said, "Hey babe, I need your help." The woman's identity has not been revealed, so she's just listed here as individual 1. She replies to David's message, "Hello babe, of course, tell me." David says, "I have a friend in Serbia who's a writer. She's a small character who is Colombian. She has a few sentences that have to be translated from Serbian English to Colombian Spanish, like how a Colombian girl would speak." Later on, David writes out nearly the exact same message sent from Anna's phone to her friends. Quote, "I met someone wonderful. He has a summer house about 2 hours from Madrid. We are going there now, and I will spend a few days there. There is barely any signal, though. I'll call you when I come back. Kisses." Then David says, "What do you think? Do you think it comes across naturally?" Now, the reason we know about all of this is because the woman, who's listed as individual 1, had told her mom she was seeing this Serbian guy. Her mom wanted to know more, and she Googled his name and learned of Anna's disappearance. Individual 1 then discovered a news article that contained a message purportedly from David's wife, that matched the exact wording of the text she and David had put together on or about February 3rd, 2024. It was about this same time when Anna's activity completely stopped. That's things she used regularly, like her bank account, Spotify, her gym membership, all fell silent. All of this was very worrisome for Sana. She'd been in contact with Anna regularly, so Sana reached out to David for some help. And I know around this same time you reached out to Anna's estranged husband, David. What was he saying? Did you say, do you know where Anna is? How did that conversation go?
Yes. So I reached out to him that Sunday evening. And I remember trying him many, many times before I actually got a hold of him. And he said to me at the time that he was in Fort Lauderdale. And I spoke to him and we talked about what had happened to Anna. He claimed at the time that he had no idea that she was missing.
David's whereabouts during this time are an entire subhead in the court docs against him. Federal prosecutors straight up write the defendant lied about being in Fort Lauderdale at the time of the victim's disappearance. After the victim disappeared, the defendant told multiple people, including the victim's brother, one of the victim's close friends, and an employee, that he was in Fort Lauderdale when, in fact, he was actually in Serbia. After checking in with Customs and Border Protection, the feds learned that David flew out of Miami on January 27th of last year. He made a stop in Istanbul, Turkey, before flying to Belgrade, Serbia. Here's a really good point to note that David is originally from Serbia. On January 29th of last year, he rented a car there and returned it on February 5th, but with some changes. The owner of the rental car agency informed law enforcement that when David returned the vehicle, the rental agency discovered that the windows had been tinted, the license plate frames had changed, and 2 stickers had been removed from the vehicle. The vehicle had traveled approximately 7,677 kilometers while rented by David. David was eventually arrested in May 2024 at the Miami International Airport after arriving on a flight from Serbia. At first, he was only charged in Anna's disappearance for his alleged involvement in the kidnapping of a U.S. citizen in Madrid, Spain on or about February 2nd, 2024. The bigger charges, though, came down a few months later, and David now faces the federal charges of kidnapping resulting in death, domestic violence resulting in death, and foreign murder of a United States national. He's been in jail ever since his arrest, as prosecutors say he's a flight risk and could even be a danger to himself or the community. But that hasn't stopped David's team from trying to get him bond. And it's also partially why we're talking about this story today, because we learned a lot of new info in the government's response in opposition to David's renewed motion for bond. First, we got a closer look into David and Anna's relationship. Screenshots of their conversation were included in this filing, where David made threats about the divorce. These messages are from December 19th, 2023. David wrote things like, "If you go alone to see the lawyer, all bets are off. That is a different game. That is what I was saying. You can make this as easy or as difficult as you want." This is also where we first saw the transcripts from the voice notes in which Anna described David cheating on her. She says he found a new lover on Tinder and had been having an affair with her for 2 months. Another bombshell in this filing comes in the way of a notebook recovered from David's home during the execution of a search warrant that happened on May 8th of last year. There were handwritten notes found in this notebook with quotes from Ralph Waldo Emerson and Winston Churchill, and a particularly disturbing note from Joseph Stalin. His quote reads, "Death solves all problems. No man, no problem." The feds say this notebook shows David's murder mindset. A separate court filing gives us some more bombshells in this case too, this time in regards to David's brother. This warrant was just filed last month, but unsealed this month, and that's when we're learning more about David's brother and his alleged evidence tampering. David's brother is Uglisha Knezevich, who first spoke to investigators last March. During this contact, Uglisha advised that he was estranged from David and only spoke to him recently upon learning that the victim was missing from the victim's brother. Uglisha advised that he had to call his mother to get David's phone number. Nevertheless, on May 7th, 2024, after David was arrested, the first person that David contacted while in custody was Uglisha. During this call, David alluded to having recent conversations with Uglisha regarding the different outcomes of his arrest. According to these docs, David and Uglisha have chatted a lot since David's arrest. There are also allegations that Uglisha is paying off some other inmates to help keep these conversations secret. The evidence for that seems pretty strong. Uglisha mentions these inmates' names in emails, and there's also record of Uglisha sending money to these inmates' commissary. Uglisha is also accused of tampering with evidence. On July 27th, he apparently reported David's iPhone as stolen or missing, but it's been in FBI custody since David's arrest back in May. By reporting the iPhone device lost or stolen, Apple allows the device to be locked with the device passcode. In addition, Apple does not allow the lost or stolen device to be accessed, even if someone attempting to access the device had the passcode available. Additionally, when an iPhone is reported lost or stolen, Apple has the capability to remotely lock the device, limit accessibility, and wipe the device, returning it to the manufacturer settings. Agents also searched David's parents' home in Serbia, and during the search, law enforcement viewed Facebook messages in David and Uglisha's mother's iPad from Uglisha that were indicative of the destruction of evidence. There are also multiple accusations of both David and his brother impersonating Anna on the phone. In one instance, a call came from someone pretending to be Anna, hoping to cancel 3 insurance policies held by her and David's business. One of David's employees later came forward and said she was the one who pretended to be Anna on the phone. She says she did it because David threatened to withhold her paycheck if she didn't. Uglisha is also accused of faking Anna's voice when calling American Express. Uglisha was trying to authorize his use on Anna's card. Uglisha is accused of faking Anna's voice when calling an American Express. He was trying to authorize his use of Anna's card. This is straight from the court docs. He appeared to alter his own voice in an effort to sound as if he was the victim during various points of the call. Given that the victim's friends and family had not seen or heard from the victim for 11 months, it does not appear that Uglisha was legitimately added to or authorized to use the victim's credit card. About all of this, David's legal team has released a statement reading, quote, "The allegations of misconduct in the unsealed search warrant are completely false, based on pure speculation. Every allegation will be refuted with evidence in our supplemental filing." All of this is just another twist and turn in the case of Anna Knezevich, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. And for that, we're going to bring on today's guest, Tom Smith, retired NYPD detective. Tom, thank you again for coming on. You always give us great insight. And so I wanted to start with this first question. Anna has now been missing for 1 year. In February of 2024, she went missing, and now we're still getting new details. That's why we're doing the story today, a year later. So does that mean the investigation is still ongoing and more details could come out?
Oh, without a doubt. You never close when there's an open possible homicide. That doesn't get closed. There's no statute of limitation in the United States for a homicide. So that always is a continuous investigation because of just how investigations work. You know, you can go months without hearing a thing or seeing anything, and then all of a sudden something comes up. So that's why homicide investigations in particular are always left open.
I think that that is a great idea, though, because just this year now, last month, we learned some more information, which is why we're doing the story today, this warrant. A lot of things that came out of it, but I wanted to start with the brother of the defendant. He's now been accused of tampering with some evidence. What do you make of all of that right from the jump?
Well, that's why investigations are kept open because you never know what's going to happen. When you get into an investigation, the most important thing in my mind that I always relied on was a timeline. So once you start putting a timeline together, if there's any gaps in that timeline of information or evidence you think is not around that is around somewhere, those are important. So when you start to fill those voids in, is why investigations kind of pick up at certain points in time. It may be months later, it may be years later. In this point, it's actually a year later. But that's why you keep digging and you keep talking to people and keep coming up with theories. That's a big part of detective work is coming up with a theory of what happened because then that fuels where you're going to go in the investigation and what you want to look at.
And I think the feds have been keeping an eye on this brother for kind of a while. At least we're learning that through the court documents based on the timeline, as you said, which is so important. And it's interesting the conflicting information that's come forward in that at first the brother says, I'm estranged from David Knezevich. I actually had to ask my mom for his phone number. Like, we don't even talk at all. But then once David is behind bars, we see a lot of emails going back and forth or phone calls, and even the allegation that the brother is paying off some people on the inside in the jail to help cover up their communications. I mean, I guess, are they not realizing that a lot of these things are monitored, that the emails are checked through, or that these phone calls are recorded?
Yeah, sometimes they think they're kind of sly and under the radar, and they're not. There's so many things that are monitored and so many things that are looked at when it comes to prison and communications and all that. And sometimes they just think they're above that, that no one's going to catch it. It's been so long, and that plays into what they do. It's been a year. They're off doing other things and other investigations, and they're not really going to pay attention to us. And us as detectives rely on that. We want that kind of complacency to take place when it comes to an investigation, because then exactly what happened here, they let their guard down and they get sloppy and they think no one's paying attention when actually they are.
Exactly. They let their guard down. And that's how we got some of this new info. Part of the story, and I'll ask you about this too, is that it takes place over multiple different countries. So that makes things a bit more tricky because he's charged here in the United States, but the crime allegedly happened over there. He's from Serbia. So when investigators actually checked his parents' house in Serbia, they found information on, I believe it was his mom's iPad communications that looked like she was saying, yep, things have been wiped, everything is clean, and they still have not found a laptop that apparently belonged to David Knezevich. This to me seems a bit circumstantial in that potentially she may have helped in the wiping of whatever device, and the brother may have gotten rid of the evidence, I guess. So it seems circumstantial to me, but is it helpful?
Oh, it's very helpful because it gives you an idea of maybe what's going on. Like I said before, the theory that detectives have, and you rely on that and you go after that. It's enough now to have an interview, to go in and maybe get a possible search warrant in that area. And it's also enough to, because the FBI is involved, you're going to get that country's security service involved in maybe brokering some sort of interview of the mother or anyone else that may have information about this.
And it's great to have any sort of information like these conversations in the jail, let's say, or the mom's messages about potentially wiping something. Great to have. But is it also important to note the things that we do not have, like this laptop that is mysteriously missing, or the cell phone that the brother apparently reported missing? So Apple locked it up and it could potentially be wiped, even though it was in federal custody. Are these things important to note as well?
Oh yeah, because again, it leads to a possible motive and a possible actions of a cover up. Why don't you have that phone anymore? Why don't you have that laptop anymore? People don't just throw laptops in the garbage or get rid of their cell phones. As you know, cell phones are people's lifeline. So just to discard it and, oh, I don't know where it is pretty unbelievable. So there's always a reason behind things, and when you match it up to a possible homicide or a missing person investigation, it leads more to a question about what happened with it.
And I think you're the one who said to me in one of our past interviews that there are no coincidences, which is what I was kind of hearing in my head as you had that answer. We've talked a lot about the brother, but I want to talk a bit more about David Knezevich. This part was kind of crazy to me. So, when investigators served a search warrant of his home, went through and found things, they found a notebook that had some writing in it, inspirational quotes. Some kind of made sense, Ralph Waldo Emerson or Churchill, but there was one that was from Joseph Stalin. And the quote, I want to read it. It was, "Death solves all problems. No man, no problem." This is not a usual inspirational quote, motivational quote I've ever seen anybody write down. I mean, it stuck out to me. Does it stick out to you?
Oh, very much. And for some reason, the amount of cases I've done with bad guys writing things down, I don't know why they do it, but they continuously do it with manifestos and diaries and all that. They always do it, and most of the time, and the majority of the time, it is leading to something, and it is part of the motive of what happened. And they just continuously do it, and that's why detectives look at things like that. you look at notebooks and you look at writings, because a lot of times it does lead to something that these, individuals just jot down, because why? It's on their mind and it's continuously circling in their mind. So to get it out of their mind, they write it down. It's the same thing with computer searches. To get it out of their mind, they jump on Google and they start searching things. And that leads to, a possible break in cases.
Now, something you brought up a lot throughout all of this is the motive. And to me, the motive seems pretty clear here in the fact that they were estranged, going through a divorce, and had a lot of money in the bank, millions of dollars, at least according to the feds. Does that sound like a very clear motive to you? I know that that's not required in order to prove anything in a court of law, but usually helpful for juries. I mean, it's pretty black and white to me. What do you think?
Yeah, a motive is always good to have, not necessary as you just stated, but it's good to have because it just builds your case and makes a stronger case. Money, unfortunately, when we see these, and Sierra, we've done shows together, money is always a central point in a lot of these cases. And the more you go into the money part and their finances, the more of a motive that seems to kind of show its ugly head.
We talked about this part a bit too, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. The fact that this happened over multiple places, they were from Florida, but also originally from Serbia and Colombia. Then she was living in Madrid, and there's apparently Italy that was involved. A lot of things happening over there. How would that look for the FBI here in America to be working with multiple other consulates, perhaps, or other investigative units in multiple other countries? Would that be difficult, or do they have good relationships? What is your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I had to do that myself. When I was in the Joint Terrorism Task Force, we had to deal with multiple countries at the same time, and it's a working relationship. They are very helpful with helping the FBI in the United States with the case that they're running, particularly when it comes to one of their citizens, in this case, a resident, permanent resident. But in any case, it's all about communication and it's all about helping one another to get to a final, conclusion to a case, especially something like this. So any experience I've had with dealing with other countries and dealing with other security services is always positive, because everyone wants the same result. No one wants a bad guy running around. No one wants someone that's responsible for a murder running around their country or another country. So they're always willing to help.
It does seem like that is the case based on the evidence that we've reported even in our past stories. So, for example, over in Madrid, we have those security camera images of who feds now say is David Knezevich, the person with the helmet, also the person who was buying supplies in Madrid. So we have seen some of those things. And I want to talk about that evidence because that's been the major evidence we've talked about throughout covering this case for about a year now. What do you think? Do you think it looks like it was David Knezevich? People are talking about the eyebrows, that they're very distinct. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it does resemble him. But again, you read into the timeline with matching up videos, and that's why timelines are so important, because you can place someone at a particular area when you're looking at the timeline, and I think that's what happened here. And videos are great. Surveillance cameras are a great tool for investigators, no matter what country you're in, no matter where you are. It always helps out with where they are, what they look like, what their actions were, what they're possibly buying. So it all is a positive thing when it comes to the investigation.
And something that we have to remember throughout all of this is it is about Anna. All of this started because she disappeared, and now her estranged husband is charged in connection with her murder, but we still haven't found her, whether it's a body, remains, or if it's her. Do you think investigators are still actively searching? I know it's been a year. There has been weather conditions. If she was perhaps outside, I mean, who knows what could have happened? We still are unclear. But do you think investigators are still looking for her?
I think they I think they would go and look for her on a tip. I don't think it's a constant active search that's going on, because that just takes up way too much resources for that length of time. But I think if a call comes in or a tip comes in, they would certainly act on it. But in all my experiences, when it comes to bodies that aren't recovered, that becomes a bargaining chip with the prosecutor, with the criminal. You know, less time, tell us where they are. Taking the death penalty off the table, tell us where the body is. That's always a good bargaining chip when it comes to these cases. Now, whether that's happening in this or not, I have no idea. I'm just saying with past cases, that is always a good chip with what they can plead to, what they're going to be charged with in order to give closure to the family. And that's always the line you use when it comes to talking to these criminals of just let the family's grieving be done. Get the body and it's all over for them. And then the perpetrator can go on with whatever they're going to plead to.
That is a great point because this is a federal case, so death penalty could be on the table. He's pleaded not guilty as of right now, but we'll see if any sort of plea agreement could eventually be in the works. I do want to talk about the potential of finding Anna. Let's say, again, he is presumed innocent at this time. He has not been found guilty and pleaded not guilty. But let's say that she actually was murdered and we don't get any sort of information from her killer about where she could be. What are the odds of finding her? I know sometimes we see this when construction workers are building a new apartment and they come across remains that were lost years ago. I mean, do you think it's possible that down the line one day we could find her even without the help of the person who may have killed her?
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, but time is not on your side when it comes to recovery of bodies. The longer it takes, the less chances are of finding them. But like I said, anything is possible, and it all depends on, as bad as this is, how it was disposed and where it was disposed. That plays a big part in it. Water would be really difficult. The ocean would be difficult, whereas burying a body wouldn't be that difficult. So a lot depends on where it may have happened, or what might have happened to her.
It's just so hard to think about for the family. I've actually been in contact with her brother since this happened, her best friend. She's been on our show multiple times. And it's so heartbreaking for them first to lose her and then to go through the question mark of we still don't know for sure what happened. I can't even begin to imagine. But the through line of our entire conversation today is that the investigation is still ongoing and we, the public, are still getting more information. And it seems like investigators are too. If you had to guess, where do you think they're looking right now, or what would be the next steps as they're moving forward in the justice system?
Well, me as a detective, I would be focusing on the brother and flipping him. That my deal would be made with the brother. My strategy would always be get the weak link, talk to him, make a deal with him, flip on the brother. You want to go to jail for the rest of your life? That's fine, but there's a way out for you. That would be my line, in anything I've done in my career. Whether they're doing that or not, we'll have to see. But they're going to keep going at it because it's important to them. And detectives take cases seriously, and they take it personally when it comes to victims, especially that aren't found, because it's always a void. It's always on your mind. Where is she? Where is she? Where is she? So that plays into their focus and their drive to somehow come to a conclusion with this of where she is.
And all of that is what we really want, justice in the case and some sort of resolution. So definitely one we'll continue to follow. Tom Smith, thank you for coming on and walking through the case with us today.
It's always a pleasure, Sierra. Thanks for having me.
There's no word yet if David's brother could face any federal charges in the allegations against him. As for David, he's pleaded not guilty to all of his charges. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.